I've paid thousands of dollars in courses to learn what you're basically teaching on your podcast for free. What you're putting out there is so valuable. So, I just really want to acknowledge you, and I definitely send everyone to your podcast.
You were virtually one of the first mentors that I looked up to and started following. You're always one step ahead of the game. So I just wanted to give you kudos and props for that, because lots of people are watching, lots of people are learning from it.
Tucker and the whole TTM crew, Dan and Chris, thanks so much for your support. I love what you guys do, and a huge fan. Having this support's huge. So I'm grateful for that.
What is up, everybody out there in listener land? This is episode 286 of the Real Dealz podcast, and as always, I'm your host, Tucker Merrihew. I want to thank you guys for joining me for another episode where we are going to continue our Rock Stars of Real Estate series. And this week, and I keep looking through all these old interviews that we've done, and we've talked to a lot of people, first and foremost, but a lot of really awesome people that have some really good advice. And so this week's show is going to be all about being a deal finder, trusting the process, and understanding this game called marketing that we do directly to sellers in order to try and find deals. So in order to bring you guys the best content that we've had over the course of the last, we'll call it 6 years, around that topic, I've got 3 guests that really resonated with you guys back when we did the original interviews, and I know that the snippets from their interviews all woven together here are going to resonate again. And so my guests for this week's show are Denmon, Justin Silverio, and Frank McGovern. Now, all 3 of these interviews were really solid, but there was different pieces of each one that I think were great. Crystal, the biggest takeaway from her, I had a ton of feedback from you guys when I initially did that interview that said it was fantastic, because she was just like many of you that was needing to trust the process to kind of pop out the other side in this world of direct-to-seller marketing, where she actually landed a deal, she saw it could be done, and then she was off to the races, right? And so there was kind of that in-between time of doing it, but not seeing the results, that she was questioning whether or not this works. But then she made it over the hump, and we talk about that in the interview, which is great. With Justin, I met Justin a long time ago. He was part of our Deal Finders Academy, and that was way before he started Open Letter Marketing and everything else that we do together. But the basis for Open Letter Marketing, a lot of that is really the marketing tactics that we talk about and we teach in our Deal Finders Academy. And so he's now created a very successful direct mail company and real estate marketing company based around a lot of those ideas and tactics. And so we talked to him about what works and the metrics that he keeps and what you guys should be sending to sellers in order to start a conversation. And then last but not least, Frank McGovern is a beast, first of all, in the Philly market. But he's very much a straight shooter in terms of what it takes in order to succeed in this business, and more importantly, what it takes to succeed in the world of direct-to-seller marketing. And so all 3 were great interviews, and I know you guys are going to dig what we're able to splice off each of those and kind of weave together for your listening pleasure. So that's going to be this week's show. It's going to be all about being a great deal finder through marketing directly to sellers. So I know you guys will enjoy it. Now, before we get into all of that, one thing I want to ask you guys is a little favor. Now, I was chatting with my man Corey Thompson online, Mr. Roughneck to Real Estate, who was actually on the show a little while back as well. And he was talking about how Facebook froze his group, which, he's got a very sizable group, and so they got him in Facebook jail for whatever reason. And I was chatting with him online, and I said, some of you guys may have been a party to the comments that we were going back and forth, but I said, hey, you know what? iTunes actually kind of screwed us not too long ago, and they took this podcast and they made it disappear on a whim without telling us and without giving us any reason. Still haven't given us any reason why they did it. And we were able to get the podcast back up, obviously, onto iTunes. That's why many of you guys are listening to it right now. But we had almost 500 5-star reviews. 500, which is a lot. If you go look at podcasts, that are not mainstream podcasts that are, let's call them self-help entrepreneurial space that apply to everybody, right? For the most part, we're talking more specific real estate type podcasts. 500 5-star reviews is a lot. And even in those more mainstream shows, that's a lot of reviews, especially to have 5 stars. Well, they made our almost 500 5-star reviews disappear, and they didn't put them back. So my ask for many of you guys that are listening right now And I'm very bad at this, so I know this is an ask that's a one-sided ask, but hopefully you guys get enough value out of this show, or you have gotten enough value out of the show over the time that's been around, that you guys don't mind doing me a little solid here. And that solid is to go into iTunes and leave a rating and review. Hopefully you like the show enough to leave us a 5-star rating and review, or a good review with a 5-star rating. But anything that you could do to kind of help us get our numbers back up in terms of the number of ratings and reviews that we have would be much appreciated, because like I said, they made almost 500 of them disappear, and they're not putting them back, and they're not telling us why they took them down or anything like that. So it's kind of like a big black hole. And I guess the moral of the story is that, you know, when you put content on platforms, those platforms can stick it to you on a whim, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it. So other than, of course, me asking you guys for a little help. So if you wouldn't mind, I would love it. Now, on to what's going on with me and TTM over the course of the past week before we get into this week's show. And I'll be completely honest with you, it's been a roller coaster of a week. Probably one of the worst weeks I've had in a long time, and one of the best weeks all rolled up into one, which I guess if there's going to be bad, you might as well have good to kind of counterbalance it. But last week was kind of a sad ending to what was a long chapter for me. I had a English Mastiff for almost 11 years, and her name was Lola, and we had to put her down last Wednesday. It was kind of a sad day. We actually did it at the house, and our next door neighbor is a vet, fortunately, so he came over, and we kind of did it in our mudroom, and it was a sad scene for sure. But it really made me think back to, how long we've been doing this, because I got Lola when we first started doing a large amount of renovations, which was late 2008, 2009. And, she'd go to the job sites with me. She'd ride in the front seat of my truck with me. She'd do all those things. So it really made me reflect not only on all the good times that I had with her, but just really how long we've been doing this business and how far we've come and how many different projects we've done and just all of those things. So that was the bad. And for any of you guys that have had dogs for a long period of time, especially those dogs that are kind of interwoven into kind of the family dynamic or those parts of life that, some dogs just exist in the family and some dogs are a part of the family. And Lola was a part of the family. So it's definitely an unfortunate and really sad week. But on top of that, we had a lot of positive things that happened. So, that was definitely a tough part of it. But on the positive side, we sold one of our most recent houses that we put to market, our modern farmhouse. We had multiple offers on it, and we sold it in about 2 days. So that's for those of you guys that are wondering what's going on with the market. There you go, right? We have another big announcement that I'm going to hold for our $1 million builds property, but we'll be done with it here in about a week, and then I'll have a big announcement here following, maybe a week after that. I don't want to let the cat out of the bag quite yet, but I will tell you this about it. We have a local magazine here called Oregon Home Magazine, and they are going to put this home on the cover of their magazine. It's official now, so I can tell you the name of the magazine. It's going to be the cover shot for their winter issue. So basically November, December, January, February, March. That whole time period, they have one issue that covers that entire time period. And we are going to be the cover shot. So this home, we've put our blood, sweat, and tears into this thing. It's by far and away the nicest home that we've ever built. Now, we've had a, sizable budget to make it very nice. But on top of that, location, lot, the design, everything, the way that it turned out absolutely amazing. So, we're going to really get a lot of satisfaction out of completing the house, and we'll get a lot more satisfaction about, by seeing it on all the newsstands that, are at the checkout centers for all the grocery stores here locally for a number of months. So really cool. They're going to do a 6-page article on it as well, and it's just kind of a great way to kind of bookend our year with this project. And like I said, I've got another big announcement that's tied to that project that I'll hold for now, but I'll give you guys probably another week or so. Now, on top of that, we actually are buying another home this week. We wrap it up. I'm actually signing all the docs here after I get done recording today, and we're closing this thing up Friday. It's another Lake Oswego project, and we're going to do a gut rehab on that. It's a little ranch project that's fairly close to my house, so it should be pretty easy to commute to it and whatnot, but we're excited to get that one started. And then last but not least, I'm actually speaking at the Rare Bird event this week, so depending on when you guys hear this, I may have already spoke or I may not, but for those of you guys that are listening to it in the rear view, hopefully it's a great presentation. If you're listening to it ahead of time, hopefully you guys can show up, and it's Thursday night, and I believe the vendor fair starts at 5:30, and then I go on sometime around 7:30. So we're going to talk all about direct seller marketing, a lot of the tips, tricks, and things that we're doing these days to start conversations and really just generate deals virtually on demand here in what is a highly competitive marketplace, Portland and the surrounding area. So a lot of stuff going on, a lot of ups, a few big downs, but all in all, that's just kind of this thing called life, right, that we all do. So this week's show, I want to get into it here with Crystal Denmon, Justin Silverio, and my man Frank McGovern. I know you guys are going to dig it, so let's hop in and enjoy.
All right, Real Dealz podcast listeners, I want to talk quickly about our show's sponsor, Iron Bridge Lending. If you guys have not reached out to Iron Bridge already to talk to them about funding some of your upcoming flip projects, I highly encourage you to do so. I've known the owner of Iron Bridge for a very long time. I've personally borrowed millions of dollars from them over the years to do a number of different projects, and I can say without a doubt, they are the best hard money lending company I have ever come across, and that is the reason why they are the sole sponsor of this show. I've had a lot of other companies reach out to me and want to sponsor this show, but I just won't do it. I feel like I need to be genuine in who we have sponsoring the show, and it needs to be somebody that I've personally done a ton of business with. So I personally vouch for their ability to be the best, hands down, in the world of hard money lending. You won't find better programs, you won't find better terms, and they're lending or will be lending in over 20 states. So chances are, if you're hearing this in whatever state you're in, it's definitely worth it to check out their website, reach out to them, see if they're lending in your state, and if they are, I would absolutely encourage you to do business with them. Another very cool thing to note is that they have a program for most rehabs where you can actually borrow up to 90% of the purchase price. Now, this is given the fact that you are actually buying a deal, which if you're listening to the show, that means you probably are. But if you have an actual deal on the table, they'll fund up to 90% of your purchase price, and they'll even give you rehab funds on top of that, which means that it only takes 10% down to get into a project, which is unbelievable in the hard money world. So do yourself a favor, reach out to Iron Bridge Lending, have a conversation with them, see if they're a good fit for you and for your next project. I can guarantee you that you'll be happy that you did.
Now, obviously, you're doing quite a bit of volume these days. You have been for a while. Would you say that direct mail is your biggest and most consistent lead source to be able to generate that type of volume?
Without a doubt. That's primarily how I generate leads. I do some online marketing. I do JV deals just from, having a good reputation and a buyer's list in the market. I also utilize the skip tracing a lot, but my bread and butter certainly is direct mail.
Gotcha. And then do you kind of tag team the skip tracing on some of the return mail, I assume?
Yes. I'll definitely skip trace the return mail as well as, any, as I said, the driving for dollar leads. But yeah, because, as I stated before, I don't think a lot of people utilize the skip tracing. And if the public records, aren't up to date, you get the return mail. I would think a lot of people, if you're not utilizing the skip tracing, you're just throwing the return mail out. So, if you're skip tracing those leads, you can get in touch with some sellers that someone else that's just doing the mailing and not necessarily the skip tracing aren't going to be able to, they're not going to follow up, get the lead. So you'll have a competitive advantage of doing that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Now, obviously, you're a very big user of direct mail, and we've talked about some of the volume you've sent out. But in terms of, getting into direct mail, you've been using it for a while. Where we're at in the market cycle, it seems like everybody's kind of taking a tour of duty in direct mail. Some people stick, some people don't, mainly because a lot of people want overnight, results, and they want to make 20, 30 grand on one campaign. And when that doesn't happen, it's frustrating, and they fall off the wagon, so to speak. But do you feel like there's a learning curve in using direct mail to generate leads for your business? I do, but I'm curious what you think.
Yes, in the sense that, to me, the biggest thing with direct mail is the volume and the consistency. I try to, help people out, answer questions, and people will say, hey, I sent out 300 letters in the last 2 months and I didn't get a deal. And my response always is, if you can't afford to do a minimum of 1,000 letters a month, I would recommend not doing direct mail. Try using something else to generate leads, get that first deal done, and then, venture into direct mail. Because if you're not if you're not willing to do at least like bare minimum of 1,000 letters and do that for 3-4 consecutive months, like it's not going to be effective. You have to be, not only do you have to do a decent amount of direct mail, as I said, a minimum of 1,000 a month, but you have to do it consistently. Depending on, what type of neighborhood you're targeting, sometimes in, I guess, more of a C or a D class type of neighborhood, you can get a deal from, 1,000 mailers. But in, better neighborhoods, you might have to send, upwards of 3,000 letters to get one deal. So, if you're sending out 300 letters a month, it could take you a year to get one deal because of the law of averages. There's sometimes I'll mail out 5,000 letters and I'll get one deal. Other times I'll mail out, 5,000 letters and I'll get, 3 or 4 deals. So you can't do something one time and it isn't a true gauge and a test of if it's working or it's not. You have to be consistent with it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's got to be a sustained effort. I look at direct mail, and I think for me, the biggest reason why people fail is that they don't stay consistent with it. Or, I agree volume is something that people need to get up to, but, they may send 1,000 letters, but they do it one time. They're not consistent with their action. And especially, as you mentioned, as you go into the more competitive markets and the more competitive areas within markets, you have to be able to build some brand equity, some awareness through multiple touches. You have to stay consistent with that mailing, wouldn't you say?
Oh, exactly. If you're not doing it consistently, somebody else is, and just because somebody gets your letter, in June and they're like, hey, I'm not interested in selling, by August, when you hit them with the third letter and maybe they're ready to sell and they're like, all right, I remember Frank McGovern. This is the third letter that I got from him. Let me give him a call and see what he's offering. Where if someone else owns a letter, they're less likely to get a response from, as opposed to someone else that mailed to that same person 3 or 4 times.
I totally agree. And I think that, what I'm getting from what you're saying here is really probably the best piece of advice that you can give people who are looking to get into the direct mail game or have just gotten into it is really consistency. You have to stay consistent. Direct mail is almost like an ongoing action that I'm sure in your business, it's like part of the daily routine, right? I mean, you're always sending out mail week in, week out.
Yeah, like literally every Monday we place an order for letters. So every single week I'm sending out letters.
Yeah, and I think that's, especially now, that's what you have to do because it is a little more competitive out there, mainly because a lot of the low-hanging fruit, foreclosure-related inventory, things like that have dried up. So, we have to work a little harder as real estate investors. We have to spend a little more money on the front end to go find these deals. We can't just, go bid on stuff, on REOs, things like that essentially are free in terms of acquisition costs. Now we have to spend money. We have to treat it like a business. And I think that's where a lot of people get tripped up.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. The market has definitely changed for the better. It's a lot better today than it was a couple of years ago. And, I could do less direct mail, 2 years ago, and it would take me less letters to get one deal, where since the market has picked up, everybody wants to be an investor, and, it's just significantly more competitive today than it was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that is for sure. And one last thing about direct mail, and then we'll talk about what you've got going on right now. Would you say that there's a learning curve on the human element as well in terms of dealing with people? Because, like you mentioned before, you've got a gal that basically deals with your initial intake of leads. But do you think there's a learning curve in dealing with people and realizing that if you're going to generate deals directly from sellers, you have to get good at dealing with and talking to people?
No, definitely. You can learn so much by reading or from someone telling you like, hey, this is what you say in this situation. But to me, I know me personally, and I think it's true for most people in general, the best way to learn is to do. So, your first call, you may not have all the answers. When a seller is asking you questions, it's extremely important that you're sounding comfortable and confident. You don't want to be mumbling over your words or not have an answer to the question that they have, because it's not like, these people are selling, one of the biggest investments they've ever made in their lives, so it's important to make them feel comfortable and confident. And in the beginning, that is hard to make someone do because you don't have the experience, you're not quite sure what they're going to say to you. And it's just, from my experience, with myself and just kind of with the employees that I have, there is definitely a learning curve. It's, as I said, you can teach someone so much, they can read so much on how to react to a situation, but it's very different once you're actually in the situation and on the call.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people have a hard time kind of pushing through that. And there's also just the overall level of uncomfortableness. I know that, when I first started calling back sellers and sending mail, it was uncomfortable. I mean, and then I brought Chris on at the point that I'd kind of powered through, got comfortable with it, and I hired Chris, who was my first hire in terms of kind of helping me grow the business here in the office. And, he said that I used to set him up and say, all right, here's the callbacks for today. And he used to sit there and stare at the phone for a little bit and not want to pick up the phone and call it because he was uncomfortable. But, that was years ago now, and he's kind of built thicker skin and he just understands how the business works. And now he could make 100 calls a day and it doesn't bother him at all. So I think there's definitely a growth process there that we both mentioned.
All right, guys, I want to take a minute here to talk with you about our Driving for Dollars app. Our Driving for Dollars app is in the iTunes Store. It's in the Google Play Store. It's free to download, and you get a 5-property free trial once you do. Now, if you like what you see and you play around with the app and you're like, you know what, I could use this in my business, which you should. It's the most cost-effective Driving for Dollars app in the market by far. But there's 2 $20 plans that are available right now. So you can get up to 100 skip traces for $20, or you can get unlimited list building for up to $20. And you and your team can use the app. You can create these lists and it'll skip trace them on the fly, or you can just create an unlimited number of properties on a list that then you can skip trace outside the app. We can help you with that, or you can do it on your own, and then you can market to those properties indefinitely, and you've got a tremendous asset for your business. Now, we do a ton of Driving for Dollars. I would say a good 90% of the lists that we market are purely Driving for Dollars, and then we do some layering on top of that, of course, if we have other lists to see if our Driving for Dollars leads fall on these other lists, and then we also do some layering with the way that we market to them, which is why the app skip traces for you as well and gives you all kinds of information like email address, phone number, all kinds of stuff. So if you have not already, make sure you go to the iTunes Store or the Google Play Store, depending on whether or not you have an iPhone or an Android phone. Go download the Driving for Dollars app. It's free to download. You get a 5-property free trial. Give it a test drive. See if you like it. And if you do, we have plans starting at just $20 a month. So go download it today.
Take me back to your mindset before you got that first deal. I mean, were there times you were frustrated? What did you feel about the direct-to-seller game?
Oh, most definitely. There was definitely times when I was frustrated. I mean, I would say like the first month or two, maybe between month 1 and month 3, it was kind of exciting. I was sitting out mail, I was getting phone calls, whether there were people either cursing me out or, interested, at least I was getting some phone calls. There were some time periods where I'm sending out mail and it would be kind of like crickets. But I think I just had to kind of have faith in the process and that, the mail would produce results. So, I mean, it could get frustrating. You can kind of get down on yourself if you don't see those results immediately, especially if you only send one round of mailers. But, I just kind of, continued to have faith in the process and sent another round of mailers. And my first direct-to-seller deal came after I mailed her 3 times.
Yeah, so that's quite a process. I mean, it happened, May, June, and you probably started mailing back the end of 2014, right? So that's 5 or 6 months of laying the groundwork of, your marketing and your branding and your ongoing mailing.
Correct.
That's a lot of time to think, man, does this work? Am I going to get a deal?
And so just even hearing other stories of other investors closing deals just kind of helped me to keep the faith and, keep my confidence yes, you just have to trust the process. And luckily I stuck with it and, it's starting to definitely pay off. Those seeds that I sowed, back in October, November, I'm starting to reap the benefits of it, over this past 6 months, 8 months, year. So.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So we get through the dog days, right, where you're like, I hope this works. I hope this works. And then you get that first deal in May, June. Take me back to that deal. What was it? How'd you get it? And just what were the details around it?
This deal was off of my Driving for Dollars list. So I kind of, picked a farm area, drove around it, jot down, addresses. I mailed her 1, 2, 3 times. She responded on the 3rd mail piece. And actually, she called me when I was doing another round of Driving for Dollars. So I was in the neighborhood driving, and, that Google Voice number popped up. And I was like, oh, crap.
So you pulled over
I
and
pulled
took the call.
over and I answered it, and it's kind of hard to say, but like I could tell pretty much within the first like 30 seconds to a minute that she was a motivated seller. Like, I don't know, just the conversation and kind of like what she was telling me, you could just tell that she was motivated. So this was a second house that she had, for lack of a better word, inherited from her mom, and she was living there, but she had another house, and she just thought it was time to sell to, get the proceeds from that house to use towards renovating her other house that she was living in. So
What kind of condition was the house in?
the house definitely needed work. When I drove by, I initially put it on my list because the lawn looked, there was no grass. It was pretty much dirt. The shrubbery was dry, and the roof needed some attention. And just kind of like comparing it to the other houses in the neighborhood, you can kind of tell that, this house definitely needed a lot of work. So that's why I put it on my list.
Gotcha. So then she called you. You're doing another round of driving for dollars. You pull
Right.
over, take the call. You're feeling the motivation. You're feeling that she seems like a pretty reasonable person to work with.
Mm-hmm.
From there, what was your next step? Did you schedule an appointment to meet her at the property and walk through it, or what'd you do next?
Yeah, I scheduled, I talked to her about good 20, 30 minutes to kind of fill out her motivation and if she was willing to sell. I made an appointment to meet with her at the property. So I met with her, and I was there for like at least an hour, hour and a half. And, a good portion of that time was just, getting to know her and her getting to know me, just kind of like on a personal level, building that level of rapport. And then we didn't really start talking about the property until like maybe 30 minutes into the conversation. And I just found out, what were her needs, what were her goals. I kind of explained, what I do. And I was upfront and honest with her. I didn't tell her, oh, I've been doing this for 20 years and blah, 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 this. And I didn't pump myself up. I was just straightforward and honest with her.
Mm-hmm.
Like, look, this is what I do. I've been doing it, for the past 2 years full time. I'm trying to, build up. And I think I could tell she appreciated that honesty from me. And I think that helped her to feel comfortable with working with me. Sorry.
You're getting blown up. The gal, you were basically saying, hey, look, I'm newer, but I'm making a run at this thing. Here's what I'm all about. And she appreciated the honesty, which is great to hear because, this is a people business, right? And so It sounds like the majority of your conversation was really you just getting to know her and vice versa. The house had very little to do with the first part of your conversation.
Right. So after I talked to her about 30 minutes, just on a personal get-to-know-you level, we started talking about the house. I asked her what her goals were, what was she trying to accomplish with the house? Did she need to stay? Was she looking, did she need to stay until she found another house? Or, did she have an idea of how much money she needed? Or, just figuring out what her goals were. And once I got that from her, then she took me on the tour of the house and she told me what she knew was wrong with the house and kind of some of the repairs she had done recently. And then after that, I just told her, like, hey, I'm going to run my numbers and I'll get back with you. I tried to get a number out of her, but she was very, very adamant about not giving me a number.
In hindsight, being as, we continue to get better at getting that number out of people, right? Do you think you could get the number out of her now, or do you think she was one of those people that's just going to hold to her gun?
She was holding on pretty tightly. I think I came at her from different angles, like, well, what were you hoping to get from? Like, I asked it at least 2 or 3 different ways, and I picked up on the fact that she wasn't going to give me that number. And the only reason why I kind of, continue to pursue it is because I heard that motivation in the initial phone call that I had from her. Okay. So I knew although she wasn't going to give me the number, she was motivated. So I ran the numbers and, I know this is a big no-no, but I went back to her house and presented my number to her first. And I actually...
Did you justify it with something, or how did you go about with that? Because normally going blind, you just don't know how they're going to react. It's not that it's a huge no-no necessarily, but it's hard to know how somebody's going to react. They could throw you out the house, or they could say, you know what, Crystal, we got a deal. And you just don't know.
I justified it in a sense of I just told her basically my methodology and said, like, I looked at what houses are selling for that are absolutely fixed up, what they're selling for, and I just factor in, how much repairs this house would need and just some other cost of selling factors such as a realtor and stuff like that. And this is how I came to that number. I didn't really give her hardcore, a realtor's commission is 6% of, $400,000 type of. I didn't break it down like that. So I just kind of gave her an overview, and she understood that, and we negotiated a little bit, and we ended up settling on a price during that second meeting.
Gotcha. So you basically put out a number. It wasn't offensive to her, obviously, but she came back a little higher. You might have come back somewhere in the middle, and then you guys made a deal. Perfect. What was your plan then at that point? Because she was going to be able to leave upon closing. There wasn't any rent back or anything that she was going to need?
No, she didn't need any rent back or anything because, like I said, she had a second residence that she could go to. So she was ready to go. She wanted to close escrow kind of like as soon as possible. Her main concern was some of the furniture in there she didn't want. So I just told her, look, my policy is take what you want, leave what you don't. And I think that she was happy to hear that. So she left a couple of couches and some other things. So I think that really appeased her in wanting to work with me. And she even told me flat out, she's like, I got other solicitations from other investors just like yourself, blah, blah, blah. But I chose to call you.
Did she say why?
She remembered my specialty marketing piece that I got her, so I think that kind of stood out as well. And I think just kind of the vibe that she got from talking to some of these other investors, maybe she just didn't get the same sort of, I don't know, people person vibe that she got from me.
Right. So the specialty marketing piece got the door open for you, and then you kind of brought who you are with you to the appointment, and then you closed the deal yourself, essentially.
Correct.
So the marketing piece gave you the opportunity, you took advantage of the opportunity, and you ended up closing the deal. So at that point then, who'd you flip it to? You don't have to give names, obviously, but did you find a rehabber then that you could flip it to or assign to, or how did that go?
Yeah, like I said, I was upfront with her, and I told her, I work with partners, hard money partners, construction partners, stuff like that. And I told her I wanted to bring in my money partner to walk through, which was the person I had in mind that I was going to wholesale to. So they did a walkthrough and they were on board. I told them the price. I told them, what the ARV I felt was and what repairs were needed. They saw what repairs were needed. And I told them the price that I wanted, and they agreed to it, and we just pretty much got the deal done.
So that's great. So you used the strategy then of basically saying, hey, look, I've got money partners. They need to walk through and okay the deal.
Right.
Obviously, I mean, yes, you are partnering, but they're the ones that are ultimately buying the property from you. It makes it a nice seamless transition to get somebody in there, get them to be able to look at the property, the seller's comfortable with it, and then, of course, it helps you close the deal.
Correct.
So that one closes. What was the net to you on that one?
The net to me on that one was about $14,000.
So that was a good first check for the direct seller game. That got you a little bit of, okay, you know what? I think this can work, right?
Right.
All right, guys, I want to take a quick second here to take a break from the show and talk to you about our Deal Finders Academy, or the DFA, as I often refer to it. Now, it's the original online mastermind group in this space that we call real estate investing. We started it about 5.5 years ago, and we've still got a ton of our original members from 5.5 years ago, which has to say something, right? But at its core, it's an amazing group of people that are from all over the country that are doing this business every single day. You get question and answer, you get advice, you can throw up a scenario and you can get 5, 10, 15, 20 people giving you advice on how to handle it, just like that, almost instantaneously. It's an amazing resource to be able to have. It's a fantastic community. We've got a ton of great people. I've made so many great friendships from having the DFA. I can't even count how many, honestly. And I know many other people feel the same way. So if you are interested in joining us, it's a very, very inexpensive mastermind group to be a part of. It's only $199 a month. There's no contract. And the best part is we don't stack people on top of each other. So that means the competitive advantages remain competitive advantages, and you can use them in your exact marketplace. So we get a kind of a detailed rundown of exactly where it is that you're going to operate, and that way we don't allow people to come into the group that are going to operate in that exact same area, and then that way everybody can flourish that much more. So there aren't many other groups out there that do that. We've remained very committed to keeping an exclusive group and making sure that all those competitive advantages benefit those people that are in the DFA. So we would love to have you as a part of it. We're trying to add some more people to those areas that we have space. So reach out to us today. Go to the dealfindersacademy.com. From there, all you got to do is book a call with Dan. He'll chat with you. We'll see if we have space and if it's a good fit. And if it is, we'd love to make you a part of our DFA mastermind group.
The reason why I wanted to get you back on the show is I wanted to talk about the state of direct mail marketing and just really kind of where we're at with it. I've seen it kind of go through a pretty big change over the last few years, yourself included, I'm sure. It used to be easy to get the phone to ring and get leads in your funnel. Now it's become a little bit more difficult, mainly because there's just been a lot of people kind of jumping in and playing around in it. And so I want to kind of give you the floor, and maybe you can kind of give us, in your opinion, kind of the state of the market in terms of using direct mail to find deals, as we head into the beginning of 2018.
Yeah, so I completely agree with you. Over the last couple of years, direct mail was a very easy way to get in touch with homeowners, get deals under contract where you didn't have any competition. Now, I've seen a lot more people dive into direct mail because it's been such a great avenue. So response rates are decreasing, and it's getting a little bit more difficult to get deals. However, I see a lot of people doing direct mail incorrectly. So if you have a good grasp on how to do direct mail and being consistent with direct mail, then you will still be successful with it. But I have definitely seen a change over especially the last year, in people getting involved in direct mail.
I agree with you. I mean, we're obviously very consistent about it here. I mean, even just a couple of weeks ago, we put a deal under contract that I was kind of going through the numbers. We're closing here next week, but I was kind of reassessing numbers on it yesterday, and, we're picking it up for $270. Probably needs 25 grand worth of just spruce up. And if we put it on the market for $399, it'll probably get bid up maybe another 10 or 15 grand above there. And it's a simple ranch rehab, but that was a result of direct mail. That's what everybody wants when they kind of venture into it for their first campaign. But I wish I could say that was our first campaign to that area, but it wasn't. We've been mailing that area for a while, and this was just the time that this person decided to respond. But the point is, they responded. Those deals are definitely out there, but it takes a lot more cultivating these days, which I think is why a lot of people have frustrations with it, because they kind of want the instant gratification of their marketing. And I think a lot of that has to do with just the mantra of the internet and, instant success and everything like that. People feel like if they don't get that on their first 2,000 letter drop, then, screw direct mail. It doesn't work. But with that being said, what are some of the biggest learning lessons that investors should know about using direct mail these days that you've seen with, yourself and obviously all your clients that you service at Open Letter Marketing?
So a couple of things that I see people doing incorrectly that I think is really hurting their response rates or their ability to be successful is, one is that they kind of just go one and done. They send out a bunch of mail, they have a budget, they do it all at one shot, they don't get a deal off that, and they say, direct mail isn't working. When I try to tell everyone, picture yourself doing this for the next 6 months. Get your budget, know what you need to do for the next 6 months, and allocate that over the 6 months that you have, so you can consistently hit these people over and over again, so you can build that rapport and that consistency with them. That's huge. Doing the one and done, I just tell them that's a waste of money, because the chances of you getting a deal is probably going to be lower than if you're consistently mailing to them over and over. The other thing is lead lists. Lead list is huge, and I see a lot of people just going off ListSource and going with your standard absentee owners. And when you're in a hot market, those are saturated. Those lists are very, very saturated. So making sure the quality of your lead list is top notch, like doing driving for dollars, mixing lead lists, layering lead lists on top of each other, that's even more important in saturated markets. So I don't see too many people really honing in on great lead lists. So a lot of my time for myself, for my own investment business, I spend a lot of time on just cultivating great lists and making sure I'm hitting them. And then the other thing that I see is people are just doing the same old with direct mail. They're doing the same postcard, the same letter that everybody else is doing. So when these people get stacks of 10 or 20 letters and they're all the same and nothing makes them stand out from anybody else, they don't have a really good shot of getting a deal over anybody else. It's just a luck of a draw. So getting yourself using a little bit more creative or unique mailers definitely helps to get you to stand out.
It's funny, as I was listening to another podcast this past week, and the guy has a good podcast, so I don't want to diss on him at all, but he was talking about he's finally reflecting on the mail pieces that he actually sends. And I wanted to reach through the phone and be like, it's about damn time, people. Like, think about, you have to put yourself in the position of the person receiving that direct mail piece. And so when you're sending the same old yellow postcard that says third notice, I need to get a hold of you or your house is going to explode kind of thing, right? Like, you got to think about how that impacts the person getting it, or how does that make them feel? You really have to think about that. And then also think about what it is you're sending them and how to get their attention in a positive way. So I think you're right there. People they don't want to put a lot of thought into it. And then they also don't want to commit to marketing being an ongoing action for their business.
Yeah, sometimes people just get a little bit, I guess I would say, lazy in the fact that they don't want to reinvent the wheel, so they use the same thing that everybody else really uses. But the important thing is that I always look at it from the perception of someone that's getting my mailer. If I'm sending the same mailer that everybody else is sending, how is that going to be perceived by them? Whenever I send somebody, I want to make sure my mail piece, what I put together, represents myself, the quality, the trust, building on that. That's very important. So there's specific things that I include in my mailers and what I do to them to really present that to the home seller. And just recently, just going off of what you said about the deal, someone just called me after 4 years of mailing to them. It looks like we might be getting a deal done. And I just got another property with my mailers because of the niche marketing that I've been getting into, that we picked it up for $550. We're wholesaling it for $650. So not having to do anything with it. So those deals are still out there, and you just need to make sure that you're doing the direct mail how you need to do to be successful.
I'm going to bounce all over the place here because I don't want to deviate too far when we hit good topics. But there's a big kind of mantra out there these days that's being packaged up by, a lot of the guru crowd to get people's attention, which is like the multiple points of motivation list, right? It's like the ultimate list of people that, for whatever reason, may want to sell. Like, let's say they have a code violation, they have high equity. The ultimate would be code violation, high equity, and they're 4 months behind on their mortgage, right? Something like that. So what, in terms of like kind of the super list, I know you've been doing this for a while and you do it for your clients as well. How do you layer those things? What are just a couple examples of some stuff that you use for layering to kind of have those multiple points of potential motivation, we'll call it?
When I build a lead list, I go basically town by town. So I build my lead list for each town before I move on to the next. And when I'm looking in those towns, because I do a bunch of different things, if someone's renovating, doing new construction, wholesaling, all those, so they can layer in driving for dollars, tax liens, they can do code violations, they can add in absentee and equity owners, but only to see if they are layered on or included in other lead lists. If they are, then I put them onto my super lead list, is what I call it when they're in multiple lead lists. But then if they're not in my super lead list, I'll remove them from my list, because I don't want to mail to people that are just on the equity list, because I know everybody else is mailing to them. But I will include them if they're a part of another, like a driving for dollar list, or they have code violation. So I have probably about 15 different lists that I do that with and layer them on top of each other. Some of them I only include if they're on my super lead lists and then remove them if they're not. But other times I'll include them only if they're on that one list. So there's a lot of layering, a lot of thinking about it. So that's why it takes a while to create a really strong lead list that I've been getting good results off of.
And I'm assuming, too, that some of that is, more specialty type redevelopment lists and things like that you can custom create, obviously. We do a lot of that here. And a lot of those types of leads, as you've probably found, they don't really show up on many of the other lists either. So, you obviously lump those into super leads because nobody's really mailing a lot of stuff that needs heavy redevelopment because it just doesn't fit within the box of normal stuff.
Absolutely. And it really depends on where your investment area focus is. A wholesaler's focus is going to be different from a rehabber's versus a developer's. So really understanding what it is you're looking to do and how to start and what list to cultivate is really important, because one list is not going to be good for everyone, and one list might be amazing for one investment focus, but not really that great for another investment focus. So you really have to understand where to start and what list to use.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because like for going back to the deal that we got under contract that I was talking about earlier in the past week, that was probably your more typical wholesaler rehabber list, right? Whereas we have other lists in different parts of town that are more zoning, lot size based. And so those are two different types of product, two different types of businesses that consume those leads or will take those leads and then put them to retail at some point via redevelopment or otherwise. But yeah, it's important to differentiate the two and just know what it is that you're looking for. Now, That's not to say as a wholesaler you can't go after those types of, zoning, lot size type leads, but you need to know who it is that you're selling that. You're not going to sell that to your typical rehabber, that's for sure. And I'm assuming, what about that deal that you got? I think I read about that wasn't a typical sell to a wholesaler or a rehabber type sale. The one that, it looks like you're going to make six figures on the flip.
Yep. This one was off a list where it was zoned for multifamily use, but the use of the property was actually single family. So it was a play on zoning play. So we don't have to do anything. We just got it under contract. We already flipped the contract right to a developer. So we don't have to do any fixing up or anything like that.
But the point is, when the lead came in, you knew exactly who your buyer is for something.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which is an important thing to know as the business owner for your, basically your lead machine, right? So what are some of the things then that those clients that you have at Open Letter, and obviously yourself, we've talked about a few, but maybe a couple others that they are doing that makes them successful? Just consistency, understanding that marketing is an ongoing action, anything else that jumps out at you?
Yeah, I would say those two things: consistency, lead lists, making sure they have good lead lists there, and using unique or creative mailers to get them to stand out. Things that they're putting into the letters, always having your logo on it to brand recognition. The more times they see a logo, the better chances that they have to remember you, because most people remember an image better than they do a name. And just knowing that direct mail, yes, it is costly, but it does work. And I see a lot of people that just get really nervous about spending, so they either just don't get into it or they stop because they might not see the results on the first couple. But knowing that direct mail works and understanding that, and it is a little bit costly, but the deals work, the ROI is still really high for us. And I would say the other thing is follow-up. So not just follow up on direct mail, but follow up on the calls. So normally for me, it takes a couple of calls for me to get even to the property and then to work out a deal. So if you lose that follow-up, you're losing a lot of deals. So making sure that the follow-up is there is very important. Answering as many calls as you can, or using call service to help answer. Because I know when I was doing real estate investing part-time and the calls were going to voicemail, it would take maybe 5 to 10 times of me calling them to try to get them back on the phone just to find out that it was a bad deal. But how much time did it take me to do that for each person? It was crazy. It took so long. So I would say those things are the most important.
Yeah, I think back end, getting the phone to ring is kind of step one these days. Step two is obviously answering the phone, whether it be you or a call service, like Ryan's Call Porter, something along those lines, or yourself internally, being able to kind of sift and sort the lead or qualify it right away. So like you said, you're also not spending hours chasing people down after the fact to be able to just, basically say, well, they want 120% of retail. It's no deal right now kind of thing. You want to be able to kind of get through that. But then also having somebody who's qualified to talk to them and kind of figure out, does it look like a deal? Is there any opportunity there? Those types of things. I think a lot of people just kind of shoot from the hip and they don't think about the back end before they start the front end. And so they have some conversion issues that happen, and then they want to blame direct mail for not working also.
Yeah. One other huge thing that I would add in is that people that's starting off real estate investing and using direct mail, when I started off doing direct mail, I was new at real estate investing. And I guarantee I've missed a lot of deals because I didn't know how to convert the deal or what I should do with it once I purchased it. So I see a lot of people that their deal rate is probably lower because they're new and they're having a tough time even evaluating the deal or figuring out the rehab. There's a bunch of different things that you can mess up, but you have to understand that that's going to happen regardless if you do any other form of marketing and just talking with sellers. You're going to screw up. You're going to make mistakes. Your deal rate is going to be much lower, but as you learn and go through, you're going to be much more successful just because you have a better understanding of real estate investing.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, no matter where you spend the money or the time to generate the leads, you're going to screw some of them up. That's just the reality. And so you can't blame direct mail for that, because if you weren't using direct mail, you're going to screw up leads from any other source as well. So I think direct mail becomes a scapegoat for a lot of people there because they're spending money on it and they're so hypersensitive to the fact that they are. I had some conversations with some people not too long ago, and they were like, I have to spend $4,000 to get a deal with direct mail. And I'm like, well, how much money do you make on the deal? $100,000 plus. It's like, what are you whining about? Right. Just nut up there, partner. Put on your big boy pants and I mean, I broke it down in a podcast not too long ago, but if you're buying off the RMLS, you're probably going to make 30 grand on that same deal, and you're paying a buyer's agent probably 8 grand, right? So just keep it all in perspective. But yeah, you're right. You're going to screw up some deals and some leads initially. So just factor that in. It's just a cost of doing business. It's cost of learning. And, it's about getting over the hump, getting better at sifting and sorting leads, talking to people, putting deals together. And then also at the same time, just continuing to market, because it's an ongoing action. I think that's the biggest thing I've heard from people, is that they just don't understand that direct mail or PPC or whatever, it has to be an ongoing action. And if it's not, then you might as well just throw your money away, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
So with that said, let's talk about some other cool things that you're doing, and we're doing some of this as well, with kind of layering our marketing, right? Direct mail is kind of the foundation of how we generate leads. But what are some cool new products or things that you're able to do for people, or that you're doing internally in terms of maybe on the digital side to layer your marketing as a nice complement to the direct mail?
Yeah, so direct mail, as you said, is kind of my base. I'm always doing that because it's directly getting to the people that you want to prospect. So based on property, location, all of that, very easy to hit them with direct mail. Everybody has a mailbox that owns a home. So in addition to that, on the digital side, we're doing IP marketing. IP marketing is a way to get in front of people on their computer. We can use the same mailing list that you're actually mailing to identify their IP addresses, so now that you can hit them with banner ads. So that's one thing that we're working with and offering to our customers. Internally, I'm doing that for my real estate investment company. I'm also doing Facebook marketing to reach out to not only people on my list, but focus areas where I really want to build a big brand. So certain towns near me where I'm doing a lot more development and high-end development, I want to just saturate that market with my name. So Facebook marketing, I've tagged onto that as well.
So maybe expand on that a little bit. Are you able to just do kind of a geo-targeting in terms of a general area, and then you're putting ads to those people for kind of a branding awareness type ads?
Yeah, right now I'm doing geo-targeting on just people that are in the town and a radius around that town, and everyone that owns a home. So in Facebook, you can identify people that own a home, but there is a lot of stuff that you can do with Facebook as far as targeting, and they have a ton of data behind them. So you really can get into a niche of who you want to target. You can even do likely to move as one of the options. You can, yeah.
I wonder how they
it's
do
very
that.
cool.
I'm imagining that maybe they have an algorithm of, I think the average person owns their home for 7 years. So maybe if they've had them in Facebook at that same IP address for 6 years, maybe it triggers as, ready to move. I don't know. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, I want to see how they do that, because I see a lot of websites that you can sign in using your Facebook login. So if people are going to these other websites that are maybe for sale or looking for a home that are linking with Facebook, maybe they're identifying that and seeing that they're going to these other websites. So they're pulling that information out there.
Or Siri's just listening to them talk in their phone and then relaying that information to Facebook behind the scenes.
That's probably true. That she turns on all the time for me, even though I don't want her to.
All right, hopefully you guys enjoyed this week's show. You got some added reminder value out of all those great little snippets that we were able to weave together for you guys, courtesy of DJ Dan and all that he does for the show. So hopefully you guys dug it. Now, before I get out of here for this week, I want to leave you with a closing success quote, as I always do. And this week's quote is one that I saw floating around online in a meme, and I thought, you know what, I'll screenshot that. That's a good quote, and I'll say it here on the podcast. So, this week's closing success quote is, "You're either producing excuses or you're producing results." I'd prefer the latter. All right, guys, that wraps up episode 286. I'll see you all on the next one.